Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Living Tantra podcast. Today, I am very happy to have a return guest back, Matt Sturm. For those of you that are new to Matt is a guide for transformational experiences. He's studied within a diverse array of traditions. His passion is to share in a way that's accessible, experiential, and empowering. His background spans Hatha Yoga, Tibetan Buddhism, somatic psychotherapy, sacred sexuality, and rituals for expanded states of consciousness. His approach is all about slowing down, bringing awareness into the body, and living from the wisdom of our hearts. So part of the reason that Matt and I are here with you today is that we do have an upcoming offering that we're co-creating together in September. And the conversation we want to have today is exploring 4 archetypes that can really be our allies on the path of embodiment. We're going to explore them through theory, we're going to explore them through frequency, and we're going to explore them through the expression of our sexuality. And these archetypes are, on the feminine side, the priestess and the queen. And on the masculine side, the pilgrim and the king. And essential in working with archetypes and essential in working with ourselves is exploring both their light qualities and also their shadows, the darkness here. So I want to open up the conversation. Welcome, Matt. It's really good to have you back, always.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay. And and I just want to ask you, what's the purpose of working with archetypes and how can they serve us in our embodiment process?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So for me, archetypes do a number of different things. They show me parts of myself, different places in me that my personality inhabits and expresses through. And so by connecting to archetypes, I flesh out into more of me. But beyond that, archetypes are these dynamic forces of energy that carry me deeper through my life journey. And they can offer initiations, they can offer rites of passage into the next phase of life. And ultimately, archetypes help me understand the patterns of the cosmos as a whole.
So essentially what you're saying is that archetypes are essentially part of the code for the full expression of humanity in its wholeness. And so the more intimate we become with these archetypal energies and how they live and express within us, the more full we become in our human expression. And it's not about getting stuck in one and over-identifying with that, but being fluid with how they're expressing through us. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And even beyond that, so, when we look at Carl Jung and how he was working with archetypes, the idea is that before we start to engage with them, they are unconsciously influencing our behavior. We're kind of beholden to them. And then his word is individuation. We go on this process of awareness and discovery where we separate ourselves, the center of us, from these archetypal influences. We find our center, we find our core, we come into our heart, into our embodiment. And then from that place, we're able to relate back to these energies from our center in a way that is healthy and generative and life-affirming.
Beautiful.
So the idea is we want to become aware of the archetypes and we want to get to know them so that we're no longer being just unconsciously reactive to them. But we can relate to them from our sovereignty, which we'll talk about with the king and the queen. And as we do that, we don't want to be an isolated island just by ourselves. The archetypes live in the transpersonal realm. They're vast, they're huge, they're undefinable, they're unbounded sources of energy and wisdom. And so as we center in our authentic self or our organic self, we then want to open up the channel to connect with them. And it's called the ego archetype axis. And that channel creates a pathway for that wisdom and that energy to connect. And that is like the fruition of where we want to get to in working with the archetypes.
Mm. And so, obviously the depth of work that you and I come from, what we're inviting people into is not just exploring the concepts or the theories of these archetypes and the understanding, but literally the embodiment of these archetypes. Can you just introduce us to each of the four that we have on the table today?
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So we'll start with the priestess. The priestess is a very powerful feminine archetype, and she relates back to the sacred prostitute, to temple work, and she's basically a mediator. She mediates between the ordinary world, the profane, the regular, and the sacred. And she introduces us, she takes us into the temple. And in the fruition, the priestess, her body is the temple. It's not some external place that we go to, but really the female form is that temple. And within that is the sacred mystery. And so the priestess archetype draws us forward into that mystery.
Yeah, beautifully said. In my personal experience with the priestess, which I'm very intimate with just because of the nature of my work, there is an acknowledgement of being the initiator into all that is sacred. And what denotes something as sacred as simply the way we approach it, how full, how attentive we are within ourselves and available we are to meet that in a moment. There was a ritual in ancient Rome and in ancient Greece called taking the war out of men. And literally these men would return from war and they would go and meet with the priestesses in the temples who would make love to them, and in that process sort of receive and hold them through the experience of trauma of war. And from there, these men would be released back to their families and their wives. And that was just sort of accepted, this ritualistic place where the priestess, she's an initiator into the sacred, but also there's a quality of healing and holding and returning to a purity of essence as well. It's essential. I mean, for me, I can't speak about the priestess without acknowledging her shadow too. And I'd love to hear from you about this as well in a moment. For me, the shadow of the priestess is really not including our humanity. There is an aspect of temple work where we step so purely into this stream of devotional Shakti, in a way, devotional flow of our, literally of our Shakti and our body within that doesn't include the deeper human woman aspects of ourselves. We're simply in this stream of holding and giving and purifying. And so I know for myself, when I have spent too long in that archetype, the shadow comes up, and there are other aspects of my life where I'm overly needy or I'm not. It has been an abject denial of my own, of an aspect of me being human and having needs.
Yeah. Just to add a different flavor of shadow in the priestess is, instead of being the initiatrix into the great mystery, she stands and invites into her egoic self. And there's a type of seduction that can happen there,
Yes.
where it's pleasure for pleasure's sake, or intimacy with some other objective that's not being revealed. And the true opening into the sacred gets lost through that.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And what I've discovered in my own journey and with others is that it's when we're not acknowledging or being honest about our own needs that we then start to manipulate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Beautifully said. And so, you know, for me, and I'm probably speaking for you too, sexuality is the most honest revealing of what is. You
Yes.
know,
Mm-hmm.
what is informing, you know, a lot of our actions, a lot of our expression, a lot of our doing in life. And so when we delve deep into the sexual circuitry, it really unearths where in us these aspects of shadow are still being held, and where we can rest in and further experience and allow that innate flow of our devotion or our Shakti in relation to the priestess specifically. Anything you want to add about that?
Absolutely. You know, when we bring our intention in a strong container into our sexuality, then we get to discover that truth. And it is like this magical window that shows us, oh, here's what's here. And when we're not bringing our intention into our sexuality, this is kind of how that unconscious influence of the priestess can disrupt us, is that's where our shadows play. That's where our seduction strategies play out, where our wounds hook onto other people's wounds. And so using the archetype and our sexuality, we get to dig into and find the core of truth, and the place where I'm not interested in the sacred, or I'm not interested in true intimacy. I really just want this other thing, whatever that is.
Yes. Yeah. Beautifully said. All right. Should we move into the Queen?
Yeah. Okay. So then the Queen. So both the Queen and the King represent sovereignty, one for the feminine archetype and one for the masculine. And sovereignty is the capacity to choose. It's to determine, it's to say, yes, I want this. So the Queen is an action of coming into the center of one's being. And I like to picture the queen bee, but just there in the hive. All of this activity is radiating outward from the queen, and she holds the center. And in that center, she's in service to the whole hive, to all of this activity, but she's not running around doing it all. She's just there. And it's her presence that focalizes all of this magic to unfold.
It's her being. Yes.
Yeah, being, exactly.
So is it accurate to say that the transition from priestess to queen, it's the priestess is more of a doing. It's more of a devotional doing, and the queen is more of a beingness.
Right, exactly. And so we want both of them, but there's a sequence, a maturation process where the queen tends to come online later. Same for the king. Once we find that sacred center within ourselves, the queen starts to blossom open.
Yeah, beautiful. In my lens, in my experience, the queen is even more engaged in the world in a way. It's less, there's a level of responsibility because she has a dominion.
Yes.
Because she, like you said, she's at the center of her world that's orbiting around her. So it's still service, but it's a deeper, more matured, full body, kind of more real level of service.
Yes.
That's not so much offering her body in service, but holding court.
Yes.
and meeting each initiator simply as they are. The queen, in my experience of embodiment, the priestess is sort of more of the outer, lighter expressions of our feminine Shakti, like clitoral energy, or the energy that circulates in the arc line. It's more almost luminescent and like a pearlescent, soft field of femininity. And the queen is deep and ground, almost primordial in a way that it can be transcendent. It has a real gravity. She has a real gravity to her, and holds in a way that the priestess doesn't hold so much. So, through my lens of anatomy, the queen is really that heart womb, full embodied beingness of a woman, where she's simultaneously connected to her oracle, her wisdom, her love, and her grounded power. And it's a queen further becomes a queen through her interacting with the king. It's just the nature of archetype.
Yeah. Right. I love so many things about what you just said. In my language, the responsibility of the queen, and I'm thinking of the word kuleana here. It's a Hawaiian word, which means doing what's ours. The queen becomes connected to her realm in a way that the priestess is not. And the fertility, the creative Shakti of the queen is the Shakti of the realm. The beauty of the queen is the beauty of the realm. And so the embodiment that you're talking about, it's really about expanding and opening to take on, to connect with more of our world and be responsible for that world.
Beautifully said. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the polarity of the feminine with the masculine. And, in the light, the otherness of the king and the queen creates this spark of desire, of erotic flow that enlivens both of them and helps them step into more of who they can be, who they are. And that mirror shows the shadows and the places where we're still stuck or holding on or not fully in that light.
Yes. Yes. And to be able to engage as a part of that light, we have to be full in our own sovereignty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
The
So the shadows of the queen. Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. I mean, there's kind of two different aspects of it. One is the queen abdicates her power to the king or to somebody else and says, you run the show. I'm just going to sit here and give away what really I should be directing. And this can happen externally to other humans in our life, or it can happen internally to our different parts. Like the 5-year-old in me wants to just have instant gratification. It's the queen's job or the king's job to say, no, lovingly and kindly, this is what's happening. And when we abdicate that responsibility, then mayhem ensues.
Yes. Yes. I want to speak to an experience of the shadow of the queen. Again, I'm bringing in needs. When when the queen doesn't enable herself to receive from her realms simultaneously, as she's giving, it hardens her. It feeds an arrogance and it removes her from the innate interconnectivity of life itself. And yeah, this is in my experience where jealousy arises, where misuse of power comes in. So being the queen and being sovereign in that sense is really a balance of being able to hold ourselves and simultaneously stay vulnerable, stay available, stay open to receiving, engaging, interacting, being transparent with life as it's happening and through us, but also knowing when to rely on our own wisdom or our own discernment to redirect or to allocate or to stop something.
Yeah. Yes. And what determines that capacity? It's my willingness to be honest about what's happening, and then my heart's availability to just feel, to stay in whatever's going on and feel that fully to the bottom of it. And the more I can do that, the more oomph, the more Shakti I have to then direct, to hold that seat of the queen.
Beautiful. Yeah. And those of you familiar with my work know that so much of the initiatory part of it is really moving into our ground of safety, in our root, in our womb, so that our hearts are held and safe to be able to open. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Should we talk about the
Great.
male?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the mirroring two archetypes are the pilgrim and the king. Now, the pilgrim can be any gender. Like the priestess is really a feminine archetype, but the pilgrim, like anybody can be a pilgrim. And the way that we want to use it, it holds a special place in the masculine psyche. So the pilgrim is that seeker. It is that inspiration to go explore, discover, to find, to seek out. And the function of the pilgrim, when it's really aligned, is whatever is next on my path of growth. Wherever my soul's path is leading me, the pilgrim shows me that path and helps me walk it.
So the pilgrim, I mean, you embody this archetype so deeply. The pilgrim is really the one that has the courage to walk across the threshold into not knowing, into to let go of all that's familiar and comfortable, and fully avail oneself to how life is meeting us next. Yeah.
Yes. Right.
Following our hearts. Yeah.
So there's a kind of a related archetype, the Fool, from the Tarot deck, and the Fool is the one who takes the leap. And the pilgrim has a certain quality of that, but the pilgrim is willing to be on the journey. And the pilgrim goes through the tempering and the temptation and the trials and travails of that journey to like strip away the false layers to get down to the core.
And the shadow of always seeking.
Right. The shadow of always seeking. You just named it.
Right. We both know this one.
I'm doing this training, and then I'm doing this training, and then I'm doing this training, and I'm studying this, reading this and that, constantly being busy, but never arriving.
And for me, in the pilgrim shadow, there's also an abject denial of being human. So often, our spiritual journeys are propelled by wanting to get away from what's uncomfortable, what we don't like, seeking the light. And that in itself is its own trap.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Spiritual bypassing, spiritual materialism,
Yeah.
all of these. Yeah.
Can you speak to how the pilgrim expresses through male sexuality?
Mm-hmm. So the male sexuality for the pilgrim, it is aligning my turn on to wherever my path is. And so what I'm attracted to, what my desire is showing up as, points me to the places I'm ready to grow. And that can happen in relationship, that can happen through sexual connection, or I could just be really turned on about this thing in my career and putting my life force there. But we want to include our pleasure and our erotic energy in this, in walking this path. And that's another place where the pilgrim can be cut off. The spiritual bypassing is like the pilgrim is just going to crown chakra, just to the light, in avoidance of the messier, denser, darker parts of sexuality.
So inherent in surrendering to our archetypal relationship with the pilgrim is an actual purification of our Shakti.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And just like with the priestess, when we do it intentionally, we're able to find those truths, and the wounded, strategic parts of ourselves get to come to the light. When we don't do it intentionally, they own us.
Yes. So the sexual shadow of the pilgrim.
It's basically, so one aspect of it is I keep my sexuality separate. It's over here, and my spiritual path is here. And then what happens is that sexual energy, that libido, liberates, and it takes me over, and it comes out in messy, wounded ways. Yeah.
Mm. And the other way is maybe when it's overtly included, but not being refined.
Yeah. So it's the pilgrim in his light, in his clarity, shows us the true path, that North Star that we want to follow. When the pilgrim gets lost, we go chasing these other things, and it turns into basically addiction. And that is the pilgrim following something, but it's the wrong thing. Or, it's a sidetrack and it has its own wisdom. We have to go there to live through that experience, but eventually we're going to come back to this path.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah.
So then the king. We've already said actually a lot about the king, because most of what we say about the queen also applies to the king. The king is the seat of sovereignty. It happens sequentially later on this developmental path. All the other parts of the psyche and our body start to work together, and then we find that center and the beingness of the king. So the king embodies wisdom, embodies grace, and is able to offer that blessing back out to the world, to the realm. And in the same way that the queen needs to hold that sovereignty over, rightful sovereignty over the internal parts, which are younger and less wise, the king has to do the same. He has to be that decision maker for us.
Yes. Yes. As I'm listening to you, I'm reminded, both the pilgrim and the priestess are sort of, as you said earlier, on the outskirts of culture or society. And the queen and the king are in it enough that they are creating their own laws, like literally living by their own laws of truth. They're having embodied divine laws, or the laws of truth. And this is, just as you said, the king includes all of the man's parts. This is where, in working with men and knowing men, when the lingam, when the hara, when the heart, when all the upper centers, when Shakti is flowing fluidly through all of those in an interconnected way, a man is penetrating his world fully,
Yes.
his love, with his wisdom, with his power, with his gifts, with his visionary capacity. And that's that level of embodiment is, literally what sets up the trajectory for new paradigms to be established.
Yes. And for a man to enter into the type of penetration that you're talking about, it requires the capacity to feel. We have to be willing to feel what this action is doing for anybody who might be impacted or receiving it. And there's a quality of trusting myself to go for it. Like, yes, this is good. This is going to be beneficial. And at the same time, I need to be able to feel, to receive, to have that sensitivity to what is this strength and power causing in the world.
It's so beautiful what you're articulating. The full king is really that wholeness of masculine and feminine, of receptivity and penetration simultaneously.
Yeah, and at the same time, on the queen side, if she's surrendering into opening more of herself, it similarly requires trust. Trust to hold oneself to open to all of the Shakti that's here, and trust in my partner that we're going to go there together in a good way.
Yeah, beautifully said. So I feel this, I want to touch on the shadow of the king, and then I feel this leading a little bit deeper into the dance of the king and the queen.
Okay. Do you want to start?
With the shadow of the king, I mean, I feel like we're thawing from a lot of that shadow through, the overt expression of the patriarchy and
Yes.
power without love, rule without rules. And another shadow of the king is adhering to dogma or legacy without being unified with one's heart. That the more and more I feel like men inhabiting the kings that they are really asked to determine their own paths, to carve out their own legacies. What's been held in tradition is in a lot of ways no longer serving the evolution of human consciousness where it is right now.
Yes, I agree with that. Legacy is such a fascinating topic for me. When we attach to our legacy, we insert our ego in the way to a picture of greatness. And that is one of the pitfalls of the king. The king is really a transpersonal, like trans-egoic. It's more of a soul level archetype. And when the ego or personality inserts itself and says, oh, I want to be that power, I want to be the one, or this is the legacy that I want to create, then things get distorted. And the legacy comes from the service of the king, that process of being in right relationship now. Legacy naturally takes care of itself.
Yes, being in right relationship now. I feel like I want you to define right relationship.
Yeah. So similarly, the queen has this responsibility to the realm. The king has a responsibility to the realm. And the realm might be just the house that I live in. It might be, my wife and children, or, whatever those family relationships are, my community, my friendships, this earth, this planet. Like, the more we open into the king, the wider that net starts to cast. And it's not like, oh shit, I have to take care of all of these things. It's like, I am all of these things, and I want to be the fertility, be the well-being of all of this realm. And there's not a separation between self and other in that. So right relationship is my well-being is the well-being of the realm that is mine to serve.
Yes. Yes. So Matt, a lot of feedback I get on prior podcasts that we've done together. The first one that we did, we spoke about consort relationship. And in the Pilgrim and the Priestess, there's not necessarily an assumption of other included in that. In King and the Queen, there is. And there's the relationship of the King and the Queen to the realm, outward facing. And we've touched on the innermost, their relationship to themselves, but we haven't really spoken on the role of their relationship with each other in supporting and sustaining the inner and outer both.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. So for me, that divine marriage between the king and the queen is about stepping into relationship from the recognition that the deeper I go into this, the more it's going to open me, all of my parts, including my wounds, my distortions, my shadows, my light, my pleasure, my bliss, all of that. And it's being willing to step into that alchemical fire with another human being to see and mirror back and receive all of them and have that same process happen for me. And as I'm centering in myself, in my sovereignty, I do my best to take responsibility for that stuff as it starts to come up and then work through it. And that's the consort relationship.
Yes. And in order for that to be sustainable or successful, there has to be a base level of safety, both in the individuals and in the connection.
Completely.
As well.
Yeah. So physical safety, emotional safety. A lot of this happens through attachment healing. So put on my therapist hat, how we form bonds and connect as humans. Secure means I love you, I'm taking care of myself, and I'm available. When we have that, I love you, even if I don't like you right now, I love you. I'm taking care of myself. I don't need you to take care of me, but I'm doing whatever needs to happen in order for this to be okay. And I'm available. I'm still here for connection.
Yes.
And that creates safety.
Yes. Beautifully said. So I want to transition this a little bit to speak about this offering that we have coming up, which feels really, really full. One thing that's unique about this offering, we're not just using 4 Zoom calls to explore 2 archetypes, one women's group, one's men group. We're bringing in theory, we're bringing in practice through sexual circuitry to really awaken and further activate the expression of these archetypes through Shakti. We also have a man present in the women's circle, Matt, and a female present in the men's circle, myself. So just as we're talking about the king and the queen, there's an entire different dynamic that opens up when we bring in the opposite gender in terms of our relationship to these archetypes. Part of the excitement for me in this offering, and when we did it before in the past too, the feedback that we got was how valuable it was to have an opposite gender there in the field while experiencing this archetype. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man. So, I mean, I do a lot of men's work. It's one of my main focuses for many years. And getting to have Catherine co-lead brought a completely different dynamic and richness and depth to what was happening in this men's group. And it's one thing for men to come together and talk about sexuality, but it's a completely different thing to talk about sexuality with a woman present there. And to be able to find what happens in that space is we guide through the breath and the energetic practices to connect with that libido, with that arousal. And then there's a place where it gets mirrored, which is Catherine is holding that as her seat. And then we get to explore, okay, wow, what is coming up for me here? And then share about it as a group of men. It's like a next level. So men's work is beautiful and awesome and it has its place. And then this offering is like, okay, now we're going to take even another octave deeper into what's possible here.
Oh, so beautifully shared. Yeah. And such an honor to be in that space as well. And I can share from the women's group offering that we had, again, women with women is extremely deep and profound and holding and nurturing and juicy, and having a male fully within himself and fully present on a deep, visceral ground level. Many women expressed how they just felt a rewiring happening in their bodies, an experience of a level of safety amidst arousal, amidst their Shakti, where they weren't being pulled on, drained, but they were enabled to be full within themselves amidst this other. So yes, just as you said, and it also brings up the shadow aspects, where we want to destroy and fucking castrate and kill, or where we're terrified and we cut ourselves off from our Shakti because we refuse to give you that. We refuse to open that. So it's a really beautiful, safe container to approach these edges within ourselves. And as we feel safe, sort of unpack them and include them again in the love that we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say on my side, it's such an honor. When we did this in the past, it was an incredible honor to get to be in that space. And, I don't hold it from a place like really Catherine's doing a lot of the leading and I'm there to be in my seat, to be a grounded presence and to bear witness. And what I find is that just getting to feel and bear witness is a lot of the healing that needs to happen right now.
Yes, beautifully said. Yeah. Anything else you want to share about the offering?
Well, in this offering, I get to partner with one of my favorite humans in the entire world, an incredibly deep practitioner who you all, like people out there, you all know and love. But the wisdom from this woman and her dedication and the way that she's able to drop people into the depth of experience of their own erotic life force is magic. And so I'm showing up for this being like, great. I'm so excited for the opportunity to get to partner with this person and see what comes out through the magic that unfolds.
Yay. And for me too, I have such a depth of respect, one, for your own journey, your own embodiment, what you have articulated and carved out for men, which is coming out soon in your book, which is a whole nother podcast coming. And the way you just enter these deep places of sexuality so purely, so cleanly, so heart open, so curious, it just completely demystifies it in a way. So for me, there are ways that in the depth of the feminine work that I've done, and since I've known you, I've actually stopped working with men so much because it's like, okay, he's out there, he can do that. So it's really, really rich to be met and collaborate and share in this way. And when we did it, almost 3 years ago, we were different people then, and it was so rich and full. And
Right.
I'm really, really feeling a fullness and a depth and a warmth and a simplicity to how this gets explored now. And it's not just us. I mean, really we're bringing, and Matt is so kind of grounded and clear in his articulation of theory and purpose and the archetypal shapes. That's part of it. And the practices, that sort of ignite the Shakti expression of these is part of it. The sharing and what each and every, participant brings in terms of their own questions and the edges that they're meeting, that's what sinks it home in an even deeper way. And I think kind of for the whole container, really alchemizes an experience, not just for all of us individually, but like a wave into the morphic field as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the shares are amazing. The last little point that I want to share about as we're talking about this is that your and my friendship has deepened so much, and the level of trust and depth that we have also opens that for the space. And so the fact that we have this ongoing colleagueship, friendship, like beautiful connection, that also is going to be part of the transmission of what happens.
Yes, 100%, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. Anything else wanting to be shared?
That's it for my end. Yeah.
Yay. Well, if this is speaking to any of you, in the notes below, you'll find links to more information on these offerings. And yeah, always, it's a joy to have you here on Living Tantra Podcast. And I get a lot of feedback that people want more and more and more. So stay tuned. You'll all be hearing about Matt's emerging book very, very soon. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.